Hi guys, in this section I have gathered a lot of tips, lots of tricks and lots of methods and shortcuts on how to use After Effects. I want you to get the best of After Effects, and I want you also to get your work to be easy, simple and lots of fun. Also, you want it to be faster, not boring at all. Each lecture in this section will represent a method of work or a tip or a shortcut that will help you to work faster and better. So it's important that you take every lecture very seriously. Maybe you take note, you write it on a piece of paper, or you open After Effects and you start immediately practicing. I need this information to be cemented within your learnings and you practice them every time you work on After Effects. So please go step by step in this section for every lecture and try to get the best of each lecture. From time to time, it's important that you make copies or backup copies of your projects. Don't make one single file name like you see here and start saving and saving and saving while you're making a lot of changes and building your projects. It's important that you learn how to make, versions of the project. Now, I have this nice animation here. I'm very happy with it. And I want to save this one, and then later on I want to introduce some changes, but I don't want to over save this copy. So I want to have two copies, this one and the one where I'm gonna make changes. So what will I do? This is how I work. I will come to File and say Save. So now this copy of the project Coffee Shop is saved. Now I want to start introducing some changes. Before I start introducing the changes, what I do is I come to File and say Increment and Save. Notice what it says here. It's increment and save. It is not save and increment. So it's going to increment the name of the file or the project and then save it. Let's click and see what happens. I will say Increment and Save. Now the name here has become Coffee Shop 2. So I have the first version, Coffee Shop, which is considered as Coffee Shop 1, and I have this version, Coffee Shop 2. And if you come back to File, you notice this version is already saved. So it's very safe to start working because the previous version is saved and this version now is already saved. So if I make some changes, for example, and I put it in here, okay, I can come and save this one. Cool. So don't go always increment and save. Just save first. Then you can go File, Increment and Save. Now I have a third copy is Coffee Shop 3. Why you can do that without worrying about disk space and stories like this? If you come to your filing system, your browser in the file system or the file explorer, you find out that the size of the projects in After Effects is always very small. So actually there are no movies and stories like this that are kept inside the project, except when you're doing tracking. Now there will be a lot of information. The size of the project of After Effects are always very small. And please, from now on, you start your animation, you start your compositions, and you start your project, please come and do File, Increment and Save and make a new copy. And notice it's very small, you don't have to worry about it. Now what's good about this, because also I can come to File and open Recent. The copies are all here and the other ones I have been working on. So I can see the first and the second and the third. So if I want to come back to the second, I can just click here and it's already over here. And I come to Open Recent and here you are. The three of them are here now in different order because I opened number 2. So using Increment and Save, first you secure your work and you make versions, upgrade, I would say, of your work or different versions, and then you can really be on the safe side. Thanks very much for listening. I hope this tip was very useful and please use it. I will see you in the next lecture. Now this is a very useful tip and I use it all the time because sometimes I get myself in trouble. For example, I have here a composition. I did the whole animation. I am very happy with it and I want to give it to the client or I want to upload it to YouTube and show my friends. Now I notice here that when I did the composition, I started with 1920 by 1080, which is a very high resolution. That's fine. Okay, but I don't want it 1920 by 1080. I want to reduce it to 720p. That is now 1280 by 720. Cool. if I change here and click OK, here I am, my whole composition or my whole work is destroyed. I have to come and change the scale of every layer, and I have animation with scales, so it's almost impossible and it's really very tedious to do it. What you can do, and this is a very useful tip, you come to File and you have here an option called Scripts. I hope you have seen it before, and there is Scale Composition. This is a script, it's a JavaScript that will scale your composition. How does it work? I will click on Scale, and before I scale here, I must make sure that no layer is locked. If any layer is locked, this one will not work. The scale composition will not work. Just give you a dumb null layer here. You can try it yourself here. I will remove the lock from here. That's the most important. So make sure there are no layers that are locked. And I say new composition width, and I want to reduce it to 1280. Okay, you can put any figure here, any number you want. That's okay, but of course you want to take care of distortion. And I will say scale. Notice nothing has happened. I will just look at my composition, and if I run it, it's cool. It's looking a bit smaller. I'll bring it back to 100%. It seems like nothing has scaled, but the magic comes when I right click on the composition setting. I find out it's now 1280 by 720, and it is really working very fine, and there is nothing to change or no work to be done. And this is an excellent tip. You can change to any size. You also can change by factor. For example, you can make it 1.5 bigger. And if I click OK, look at my animation, it's working very fine. What is the size of the composition now? It is 1920 by 1080. 1.5, of course, it will go back. So this is how you scale down or scale up your composition without having to scale all the layers. I'll put it back to 1280, and here you are. We have scaled everything, and it's working very fine. Now remember that no layer should be locked. Let's lock a layer. Let's lock 2 and try it and see exactly what will happen with you, so you have a good idea what's happening when it doesn't work. I will go to scale composition. I say new scale, for example. I put it at 1920, whatever, and we scale. Notice you just have a null layer and your composition did not change in size. I will delete the null layer here. So from now on, to scale down or up your composition and scale all the layers and do not have any problem, please use the File, Script, and Scale Comp. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next lecture. Let's review a bit or see how we can move the anchor point with precision. Let's draw a rectangle here, and it is somehow not in the middle of the composition. And this is the anchor point of the whole shape layer. Now I want to move that anchor point. The first one, I can use Control, Alternate, and Home to move the anchor point in the middle of the shape. You notice now the anchor point is in the middle of the shape. That's very good. Or also you can say if your shape, for example, was as big as the composition, here it is, and you have moved the anchor point and you want to return it to the middle, you press Control, Alternate, and Home, and goes back to the middle. Let's delete the big one. Now I have my shape here and I want to move the anchor point. I can hold it and move it, but now it's moving freely 100%. That's not good at all. I will go back to Control, Alternate, and Home, put it in the middle. Now the first option is to use snapping, and I'm not using these two. I'm not going to explain these two about snapping here. I'm just going to explain about the anchor point. Now if I move the anchor point now, it will move to the corners or to where there are some delimiters for the shape. Okay, but then if I don't want to use snapping, I can hold Control and now it will also snap. So without Control, it will be moving freely. With pressing Control, I will be able to snap it. It will also show you how is it moving. This is, for example, the middle line, and if I'm here, this will be the vertical line in the center, and I can move it to the corners anywhere I want. Now I'm holding Control. Cool. So remember, Control Alt Home to put it in the middle of the shape layer or in the middle of the layer if you have a different kind of layer and you moved already the anchor point, and using the Control we snap it to the delimiters, And you can use snapping, and it has some options here which I will explain in a different lecture. Thanks very much for listening. That was a small tip. I know it's very helpful, and I will see you in the next lecture. Let's look at how we can navigate in between or from one frame to another. I have here a circle where the anchor point is just in the middle of the composition and in the middle of the overall layer. I press Ctrl Alt Home and bring it in the middle of the shape. Fine. I will open position like I've done here. I will keyframe, go through frames in front, and then move it here, then move it down here. I just want to create a number of keyframes, very speedy. So now I have a small animation, or a very nonsense animation, just to show you how to navigate. So I want to come back to the first keyframe. If I click on the motion path, I'm not going back to the keyframe. The timeline indicator doesn't move. One way to do it is use the key J. You go backward. So you're navigating here. J will take you backward in the keyframes. K will take you forward. And that is only for the visible keyframes. If the keyframes are not visible, you have very many layers, and you have chosen this layer, and you cannot see it here, it will not move. You try it. So this is the first one. The second one, you have the arrows here. You can navigate from one keyframe to another using the arrows, and that is very important. That's one. So here I have an animation, and it's working. Now I like how it's working, but I don't like the timing. What I want to do is to make the time a bit longer, but I want to not to move every keyframe like this. That will be a bit nonsense. I will select all my keyframes, press Alt, click on the last keyframe and drag it this way, for example. Now notice that something is happening in the motion path, but it's just a matter of refreshing. So the keyframes, all of them moved proportionally, meaning the distance in between keyframes have been incremented proportionally. And that's how you can use it. If you select all your keyframe, you press Alt first, then click and drag. Okay, if you click and then press Alt, the whole thing is moving and is not moving proportionally. So you press Alt and you move them. You can move them here and there. Now what happens if I choose only the last 4 or 5 keyframes? I will press Alt and move them. You notice the first keyframe is always an anchor keyframe. This is the one that will not move. And also I can do the same. I can select them all and press Alt and move this way. Okay, so you notice the last keyframe now is an anchor keyframe. It's not an anchor here, it's an anchor meaning it's a stable keyframe. And this is how you can do it. You can also choose your middle keyframes, press Alt and just move them the way you want. In summary, K will move you forward, J will move you backward, and of course you can come and take your keyframes, select them and move them anywhere you want. And also you can use the keyframe navigator here, and you can choose them, all of them, press Alt and stretch them in, keeping the distance in between the keyframes proportional or not. So that's the small tip about how to navigate the keyframes, and I'm sure these are the most important tips. Maybe there is something else you can use, but that's the best tips. I'll see you in the next lecture. Sometimes there are some layers that you really don't want to see in your timeline. You want just to hide them away, and then later on you can bring them back. But mainly when we're creating templates, you don't want to show the client or the person buying the templates, the null layers and the adjustment layers. You don't want to show them this, because if you show them, they start messing them up. So there is a very nice option in After Effects to be able to show and hide certain layers. For example, here the null layers, I don't want to show them. So I will select them, select the first one, press Ctrl, select the second one, and Ctrl and select the third one. Here you are, I have the 3 layers selected. Now there is an option here which is the shy option. If I press the shy option, these layers, like you see here, will be earmarked for being shied away, so they are not seen. And if I want to shy them away, I will just come to the composition here. I will hide all the layers. Now they are hidden. Of course, these layers are still within the composition, and these layers will render, meaning if I shy the premium here, That's pretty good. Fine, I put it back. You notice premium, I shied it away, but premium here is not gonna disappear from the comp. So when you shy a layer, it will not disappear from the composition. It will just disappear from the view in the layer. That was a small tip, and it's, you know, sometimes very convenient to use that tip where you decide, okay, look, I'm working on all these projects and I really don't want to see all these layers. I want to hide from here, for example, these coffee cups. I want to hide them, and I want to hide all the shape layers. Just I will put them to shy and then enable shy, and then I have something neat and I know what I'm working with within the composition. I can just choose them. So I hope this tip was useful to you and you can use it and don't shy away from it. From time to time, you might want to see the animation of a single layer. You don't want to see all the other layers. For example, I want to see how shop is being animated. I can come to the layer shop, I already chose it, and enable the switch solo. Solo hides all other layers except the one that are soloed. So if I press on the solo here, it will be soloed. This is the only layer that I will be able to see during the preview. Okay, I can also choose more layers to preview. Here you are. Now you have chosen 3 layers that are soloed, and that's the only layers you are going to see. So this is extremely useful because sometimes you want to see only what's happening to one single layer. If you notice here, the background is somehow confusing. If I want to see it alone, I start my animation now, my preview, and I will see only the animation of these solid layers. So if I add also shop and coffee and now I can see the animation of only the layers that have been solid. Fine. But there is a trick here. Be careful. When you solo layers, these layers will render alone. The other layers will not render. It means in your video, when you produce one, you will not have the other layers. How to overcome this? If you come to composition and say, okay, add to render queue, and you come to best setting, you have an option here. Solo switches. Current setting means you are going to render only the layers that have been soloed. But if you put all off, you are going to render all the layers, soloed or not. It really doesn't matter. And usually this is the default, so be very careful. If you soloed some layers and you forgot to set that setting to all off, then you will have only these layers. Let's try an example. So I will say okay here, and then I come to my composition. You know, I'm soloing only these layers. I will come to render queue and I go to lossless. Let me adjust it, and I want AVI. Let's take quick time. I'm okay with all that. Let's render. Now watch the rendering preview. All the layers have been rendered because I put all off for the solo layers. So this is how you use your solo switch, and make sure that before you render, you have soloed or unsoloed the layers, or make sure that the layers are appearing. A similar option, or the inverse option, is to hide and show a layer. So if I hide a layer, okay, I don't see it, then of course it's not gonna be rendered. So I hope this tip was useful, and make sure you are using it very cautiously, but it's very useful when you are doing animations. There are some few keystrokes to manipulate layers that I used in the course. Here I want to make a small summary and to remind you about them. Let's say, for example, I have the animation here, and these ones are not coming in the beginning. I will select the 3 layers, press U, and notice the first keyframe is here. So there is no point of having these appearing or having this layer just showing here. The first thing I can do is to position. I use K to position and drag the layers. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to select your layers, press the Alt key and press on the left bracket. Here you are. It will cut off the layers from the timeline to the beginning of the comp. In the same way, I can say, okay, I don't want these layers to appear or to be here until the end of the composition. I want to cut them off from the timeline till the end. I will select the layers like I have done. I press alternate and right bracket, and it cut them off. And that is pretty useful from time to time, and we have used that in sequencing your layers. If you didn't do that lecture, please go back and do it. Now I want to position at the beginning of the layer. How do I position on the beginning of layer? I can come and harass like this. It's not gonna work. So there is one keystroke is the I go to the beginning of the layer, O to the end of the layer, and this is very useful. Now you remember it's I and O. So these are the two tips I want to tell you about, manipulating the layers, the in point and the out point, and how to trim a layer.